Good morning. Welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. My name is George Thompson, and I'm a member of the Worship Associates Ministry here at the church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. I especially want to welcome any visitors or newcomers to the church and call attention to the special note for you in the order of service called Welcome Guests and Newcomers on the back. And we are also pleased to welcome those of you who are joining us online this morning. The words to the hymns and other parts of the service are included on your screen. Our minister is the Reverend Thom Belote, who tested positive for COVID about a week ago, and to keep us all safer, he asked Bill Rote to read the sermon today. So we wish Thom a very speedy recovery. Here are a few things to keep in mind. We are masking inside on Sunday mornings. After the service, we invite you to join us in two different areas. The area behind the Jones building over there is a space where masks are mandatory. The courtyard right outside the door here is a mask-optional space for fellowship where there will be coffee and tea. And today we're going to be honoring Dana, her time with us as congregational administrator, and welcome Harrison with some special treats. So I'll see you in line for that. Our regular online social, or what I like to call the virtual coffee hour, will be hosted by Rachel Rose at noon today. The link is in your email for the service. And finally, if you have not done so already, now is a good time to silence your cell phones to maintain a worshipful experience. Please welcome Jenny Nelson now, who will talk about Chalice Camp and care kits for today's Within These Walls.
Good morning. This past week, I had the privilege of being the director for the church's Chalice Camp. We had 17 incredible campers, one great counselor in training, 3 wonderful and amazing and incredible youth counselors, and also Kat and Marian's support as chaperones, registrars, and paparazzi. Our camp theme this year was justice. Each day consisted of worship and reflection periods, meditation projects like Footprints of Faith and Superheroes for Justice, and art projects like activist yard signs and painting banners. You can see all of these in the courtyard when you came in and also after service. We also utilized the Chapel Hill Transit for field trips to the Ackland Art Museum, where we viewed paintings of shipwrecks to show the impact of transportation on the planet, and the Moorhead Planetarium, where we discussed the interconnectedness of our world to the solar system. Of course, there were also popsicles, games, hikes, and cheers. Our service project this week was care kits for the unhoused. The campers decorated Ziploc bags, which they filled with socks, masks, snacks, small toiletries, water bottles, and first aid supplies. More importantly, the campers wrote notes of caring that were included in the bags. After today's service, the campers and I will be tabling outside the Jones building. Please stop by and pick up a care kit to keep in your car and give away when you see someone in need. We'll also be happy to answer any questions you have about our fabulous week at Chalice Camp. Thank you.
Please stand in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels,
call to worship this morning is called The Church Where Everything Goes Wrong. 6 weeks into the church year, I have realized that I am the minister of a church where things usually go wrong. This morning, the copy machine jams repeatedly. The bulletin describing the order of worship has been copied with the second page first, and also upside down. No one has remembered to turn on the lights in the sanctuary before the service, so it's dark because it's raining outside. The microphone is buzzing and lets out a painful, high-pitched squeal, which makes people wince. We have just started the service when someone runs up with a bunch of flowers for the altar, just as someone else runs in with one of the silk arrangements we keep for the mornings when no one brings real flowers. These are real. There is laughter as the two flower bearers meet at the altar. They decide on the real flowers, and things settle down for a while, until a baby starts crying, which sets off another baby crying. I am annoyed because I want it to be quiet and holy and lovely, and things are definitely not shaping up that way. The woman who's helping with worship gets up, and instead of giving the announcements, introduces the candle lighting time, which comes later. People call out, "Not yet!" More laughter. The organist starts playing the wrong hymn, and a couple of choir members yell over the din to say, "Stop!" A few minutes later, during the period for prayerful silence, he accidentally falls onto the keyboard, causing the organ to emit horrible gassy noises. Shrieks and snorts of laughter. All pretense of Sunday morning decorum is lost, and something inside me, something furious, bossy desire to have my worship service go according to my plan, finally slides free, and I can laugh with them. This will be the first of many times that I laugh at Sunday morning details gone awry. It's also the first of many times that I imagine that God is watching, looking up or down, or over or out at us from wherever God sits on Sunday mornings, slightly amazed and maybe at a loss for words, because we, God's people, are so funny and wonderful and odd all at the same time. But I also imagine a God who is touched and maybe a little honored by our efforts, however halting, to worship and to give praise. I imagine a God who is moved by our attempts to care for one another and to name the things that we know as holy. There is a warmth in this congregation that is new to me, a simple friendliness that shines through the fumblings and failures, a love that makes the ragged edges smooth. I have always wanted to believe, really believe, that our mistakes aren't the most important parts of us. I have always wanted to believe that kindness and compassion matter more than anything. I sense that I can learn this here. Come, let us worship together. As Bill lights the chalice this morning, if you wish to, please join me in reading the words by Albert Schweitzer. You'll find the words in the order of service. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. With deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us.
a line in the sand, there's a war going on. They forgot to remember, you might be wrong. Carry your faith wherever you go. Mix it with love and let it show. But keep your mind open as you move along. And always remember, you might be wrong. Why do we argue? Why do we fight? Everybody thinks God's on their side. Just count to 10 before you throw a stone. Whatever you believe, you might be wrong. Don't cut me off, don't say we're through, just because I don't agree with you. Some flowers grow where seeds of love are sown. You could be right, but you might be wrong. Why do we argue? Why do we fight? Everybody thinks God's on their side. Just count to 10 before you throw a stone. Whatever you believe, you might be wrong. What's on the other side of life? I won't know until the day I die. If you feel insecure, you are not alone. Everybody knows you might be wrong. Why do we argue? Why do we fight? Everybody thinks God's on their side. Just count to 10 before you throw a stone. Whatever you believe, you might be wrong.
Each week in our service, we take a time to recognize any joys or sorrows that some of us may have. If you have any significant joy or sorrow you would like to share, please come forward, put a stone in the water, speak your name in the microphone, and share with a couple of sentences your joy or sorrow. Let us enter into this time of tenderness and trust. I'm placing the first stone this morning for our minister, Thom Belote, and holding him and hoping that his healing goes well.
I have one of concern and one of joy. And the joy was that we just got back. We went to Susie, which is the Unitarian summer camp, week before last, and had a fabulous time. So that's the joy. And the concern is that I broke my hand right before we left, and so I couldn't play instruments as well, but I could still sing.
Hi, I'm Kari Andrade. I have two joys to share. Last Sunday at this time, I was sitting with Barbara Rodbell with her family having brunch, and she wanted me to give everybody her best wishes. She misses our community a lot, and she's doing very well. Her short-term memory's not there, but she's still very healthy, much better than she was a few months ago when she left the long-term care facility and moved back with her daughter. So her health has greatly improved. She was put on hospice at that time, and now it looks like she's strong. And the second stone is her 27th wedding anniversary was on Friday.
My name is Larry Mason. Tomorrow is my birthday. My birthday present this year is the James Webb Space Telescope. I cannot wait to see the universe baby pictures.
Good morning, I'm Jenny Mornesh. I have 3 joys. One is our beloved Bianca Rodriguez graduated with her Bachelor's of Science in Nursing on yesterday morning. Yay, she will start in the newborn critical care unit in, I think it's October. I just started my nursing job at UNC. I'll be in the OR, so I'm still doing training, but eventually in the ambulatory surgery center. And my final joy is for my son, who I told you all he was at the Naval Academy, and he is loving it as much as anyone can love boot camp. But it's so awesome as a parent for a child to make this kind of major decision that affects at least the next 10 years of his life. And he knows he made the right one, so it's really great.
I'm Mary Hewlett, and I have altogether 4 grandchildren, 2 here. And during COVID, we were actually able to see a great deal of each other, but I have 2 in California. And it was, of course, very difficult the last few years. One of them now is 18 and the other one's 20. And I traveled with the 18-year-old as his high school graduation present for almost 3 weeks in Europe this summer. And I was going to the mountains because I can't stand the heat. And nobody here could go with me, and so I just sent an email to the 20-year-old, and I said, I've got a week in the mountains, do you want to come? And he said, sure. So he's arriving next Saturday, and we'll be heading up to the mountains, so I'm thrilled.
Hi, I'm Anna. I just wanted to share a joy today. I'm a grad student at UNC, and over the past month, I taught a class of my own for the first time, and it was really exhausting and emotionally draining, but also I really loved it, and it's cool to have finished something that I didn't know that I could do. So yeah.
I'm Shannon Richards, and I had a breast cancer scare, and I had people that in this church, in the caring ministry as well, to be supportive during the time of not knowing what was going to happen and how they were going to treat it. But I really want to thank the congregation for their prayers and food and other things that people helped with. And I got the good results, and I don't have to go through chemo or radiation, so that's good.
I'm Dana, and this is my first time doing Joys and Sorrows with just adults. It's exciting. It's cool. And I just have the joy sorrow that I've spent the last 5 years in this community, and next week we'll be transitioning with Araya to the UU Fellowship of Raleigh. It's been really wonderful being a part of this community. I've never got to work with such a welcoming, generous group of people, so thank you again.
Hi, I'm Kathy Putnam, and because our oldest grandson Levi is not here and won't be embarrassed, I can say he turned 16. And not only is he 6'2", but he's really grown in maturity, and I'm so grateful for this church, for a youth group, for coming of age, for his mentor, and for all this community has helped in terms of him growing up. Thank you. Sorry. He also got his whole family together for a dinner at an Indian restaurant, and only Levi could do this with families that just haven't sometimes gotten along so well, so it was wonderful.
I'm going to put two stones in. The first one is the joy that we have Harrison, that's going to be our church administrator. Your biggest challenge is going to be to sing a beautiful soprano with the choir. The last stone is for those joys and sorrows that were not mentioned but are nevertheless important, and those we should hold in our hearts. Let's have a moment of silence, please.
As we read in unison the prayer which is on page 477 in your gray hymnal. Forgive us that often we forgive ourselves so easily and others so hardly. Forgive us that we expect perfection from those to whom we show none. Forgive us for repelling people by the way we set a good example. Forgive us the folly of trying to improve a friend. Forbid that we should use our little idea of goodness as a spear to wound those who are different. Forbid that we should feel superior to others when we are only more shielded. And may we encourage the secret struggle of every person. Please remain seated as we sing number 396 in the gray hymnal, I Know This Rose Will Open, and our song leaders will have a little instruction for you.
That's exactly what we just said. I want to go over there, or I'm going to go over there. Okay. So we're going to sing this as a round. Heath will play the first verse through. We'll sing in unison, and then Eileen will lead this half of the church, and I will lead the second half, and this, section 2 will come in at the number 2.
This morning's reading is excerpted from one of Brene Brown's earliest books, The Gifts of Imperfection. Brene Brown is a social worker and a researcher who specializes in understanding wholehearted living. Her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, has been viewed nearly 60 million times, and likely that is an undercount. In her book, she talks about 3 pathways to more wholehearted living: courage, compassion, and connection. Each of these requires us to be vulnerable and to admit our imperfections. Brene Brown writes, "Courage is a huge theme in my life. It seems that I'm either praying for some, feeling grateful for having found a little bit, appreciating it in other people, or studying it. I don't think that makes me unique. Everyone wants to be brave." After interviewing people about the truths of their lives, their strengths and struggles, I realized that courage is one of the most important qualities that wholehearted people have in common. And it's not just any kind of courage. I found that wholeheartedness requires ordinary courage. Here's what I mean. The root word of courage, the root word of the imperfection, the root word of courage is cor, the Latin word for heart. In one of its earliest forms, the word courage had a very different definition than it does today. Courage originally meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. Over time, this definition has changed, and today, courage is more synonymous with being heroic. Heroics is important, and we certainly need heroes. But I think we've lost touch with the idea that speaking honestly and openly about who we are, about what we're feeling, and about our experiences, good and bad, is the definition of courage. Heroics is often about putting our life on the line. Ordinary courage is about putting our vulnerability on the line. In today's world, that's pretty extraordinary. When we pay attention, we see courage every day. We see it when people reach out for help. I see it in my classroom when a student raises her hand and says, "I'm completely lost. I have no idea what you're talking about." I also see courage in myself when I'm willing to risk being vulnerable and disappointed. Courage has a ripple effect. Every time we choose courage, we make everyone around us a little better and the world a little braver. And our world could stand to be a little kinder and a little braver. Freely have we received gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring to our church and its wide concerns a portion of the bounty. Please note that you can scan the QR code on the order of service and make an online donation if you wish. We will now receive the morning offering.
I can't hear the beating of the angels' wings. I don't hear no chorus of the angels sing. Got a head full of worries in this city full of sounds. Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. Will the arms of heaven reach all the way to the ground? Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. I can't see the face of the King and his crown. I don't see the light of truth hanging all around. Sometimes all I see are shades of gray and brown. Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. Will the arms of heaven reach all the way to the ground? Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. I'm thirsty at the river, I'm hungry at the feast. I've tasted the divine and it tastes bittersweet. I will do my duty, but I'm crying to be found. Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. Will the arms of heaven reach all the way to the ground? Heaven is so high and I'm so far down. Will the arms of heaven reach all the way to the ground? Heaven is so high and I'm so far down.
Good morning. You're listening to Bill Rote's voice right now, but you're actually hearing Thom Belote's words. I, that is me, Thom, tested positive for COVID 1 week ago. My symptoms were mild and are now gone. I feel well enough to be here this morning, but I am following CDC guidance, and my biggest struggle at this point is boredom, which is why I'm writing this sermon to inflict on all of you. I'll also be attending the online Sunday social on Zoom today. Remember, these are Thom's words that you're hearing through Bill's deep, rugged, handsome voice. Those are his words. 20 years ago, this is Thom speaking, was a brand new minister applying to serve my first church. One of the churches I looked at wrote something in their congregational profile that made me fall in love with them. In fact, what they wrote made me decide that I wanted to become their minister. Here's what they wrote. We are aware there are no perfect ministers, and we are not a perfect church, but there are nearly perfect sermons, and we delight in them. We are aware there are no perfect ministers, and we are not a perfect church, and they weren't. And I wasn't either. I served them for 11 years, and there were times when I wished they were less imperfect. And there were certainly times when they wished I was less imperfect. We mostly did just fine as long as we remembered not to hold each other to impossible standards. To be human is to be imperfect. Now, this is hardly a newsflash. This is something we are all forced to accept. There is no such thing as a perfect person. Nobody is perfect. And any group, community, congregation made up of imperfect people will necessarily also be imperfect. A church is made up of imperfect people. A traditional Christian put it this way. Remember, churches are full of sinners. Or again, to use traditional Christian language, a church that includes only the saved is a church that lacks saving power. Now, we Unitarian Universalists don't typically talk like this, but if you translate the language a little bit, you can see that there's some wisdom here. A church full of people who already have it figured out is a church that lacks the power to transform. A church full of people who are fully woke is a church that lacks the power to awaken. When we say that a church is a place of imperfect people, what that means is that we can be a place of growth, a place of change, a place of learning, and a place of development. It is paradoxical. Our mistakes, our weaknesses, our shortcomings, our imperfections are precisely what makes our church so alive. The call to worship that George read at the beginning of the service described a worship service going off the rails. The order of service wouldn't print, the flowers were late, the accompanist played the wrong hymn, and a chorus of babies cried during silent meditation. That call to worship was written by the minister of another church, and I've always thought it was a courageous piece to write. And thankfully, nothing like that would ever happen here. Our minister would never get sick and send his sermon to a worship associate to read for him. Our live stream would never start late, and cell phones would never ring during the service. On a different level, though, the remarkable thing about Reverend Elia Kimmler's call to worship is that the church it describes, the church where everything goes wrong, is also a church that is very much alive. This church has a choir. It has an army of volunteers helping to make worship happen. It has babies plural, in the pews, a true sign of a living church. It has laughter, so much laughter. Might every church be so lucky. In the words from that call to worship, there is a warmth in this congregation that is new to me, a simple friendliness that shines through the fumblings and failures, a love that makes the ragged edges smooth. I have always wanted to believe, really believe, that our mistakes aren't the most important part of us. I have always wanted to believe that kindness and compassion matter more than anything. I sense that I can learn this here. Researcher, author, and social worker Brené Brown, in her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, writes that those people who are living the most meaningful lives all have something in common. These people, she writes, practice courage, compassion, and connection. And each of these three things, courage, compassion, and connection, require that we be vulnerable and willing to admit our own perfections. Courage has to do with the willingness to speak all of what is in your heart. Talk about vulnerability. Compassion also requires vulnerability. The root of the word compassion means to suffer with, or even connect our suffering with another's suffering. More than sympathy, more than feeling bad for someone else, compassion requires that we join them in the place of their suffering. When we practice compassion, we become aware of our vulnerabilities, our own pain, our own struggles. To practice compassion, we need to first let go of thinking about ourselves perfect and impenetrable. And connection requires still more vulnerability. To form deep connections with another person or group requires going beyond superficial conversations. It requires letting down the defenses and being willing to share of yourself, your challenges, your fears, your uncertainties. The intimacy of connection requires that we show up with our whole and imperfect selves, especially the parts we would rather keep hidden. Consider this paradox. Our church is at its best when we practice courage, compassion, and connection. And practicing courage, compassion, and connection requires that we vulnerably admit our own imperfections. I repeat, our church is at its best when we practice courage, compassion, and connection. And practicing courage, compassion, and connection require that we let down our guard and own our own imperfections. Our church encourages us to be courageous. Think of the courage of our coming-of-age youth sharing their credos. Or think of the courage of members of the church sharing their own hearts. Or think about the courage of speaking out in public about your deepest convictions. Our church encourages us to be compassionate. The caring ministry practices compassion. So does the mental health ministry and the cancer support group. We support one another during difficult times. And our church encourages connection. We form deep connections through our small group programs, including Rare Women, Chalice Circles, Lectio, and so many more. We commit to learning about racism and gender identity and discrimination in order to learn how to better connect with each other in community. Thank goodness we're a church of imperfect people. Amen? While we're on the subject of perfection, I might mention that there's a famous passage in the Bible dealing with perfection. It is from the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus tells those who come to hear him teach to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. It is one of those problematic passages. Religion, after all, is not about being perfect. Religion is not about having the right answers. Religion is about becoming more courageous, more compassionate, and more connected. Things that require us to admit our own human imperfections. Jesus commanded to be perfected during the Sermon on the Mount, during a section in which Jesus is saying some challenging and countercultural things about interpersonal dynamics. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. By the way, Jesus' teachings about loving your enemies are extremely challenging, extremely countercultural, and highly susceptible to misuse and abuse. By the way, this subject probably deserves another sermon. But here's the thing. If you look at Jesus' disciples, his followers, those who were showing up to hear him teach and perhaps witness a healing, you would not mistake them for a crowd of the perfect people. This was not the red carpet at the Met Gala. It was a group of people who were poor and marginalized. So Jesus is clearly not thinking about perfection in the ways we would think of perfection. I wonder if Jesus isn't actually telling his disciples to resist human ways of judging who is worthy, who is deserving, who is acceptable, in favor of a way that is more expansive. Don't just love those who love you. Don't just welcome the people you already know. Be more expansive. In this church community, may we go forth imperfectly. It's the only choice we have. May we courageously speak our whole hearts. May we compassionately join our own suffering with another's. May we connect deeply through vulnerability. May we ever be that church full of imperfect people. Amen. Would you please join in the closing hymn, number 6. Join us standing as you're willing or able. It's Just As I Have Breath.
The closing words today are by Theodore Parker, and you will find them in the gray hymnal, number 683. Please read them with me. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space, its shrine, the good heart, its creed, all truth, its ritual, personal love, its profession, faith, and liberty. And before we extinguish the chalice today, let's thank all who participated and came to this service today. I invite you to join me in reading the words for extinguishing the chalice. You'll find them in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we are together again. Please remain standing in spirit or body as we sing our closing song, Shalom. If you wish to join hands with others, you can stand this way, and if you wish not to, you can do this.